so. That winter I had just turned 17 and my parents began to turn a blind eye to my pranks as a young charmer. In the company in which I spent my youth, spending time was not particularly sophisticated. In winter, apart from rides on the slides, you don't have much fun. We didn't have computers, much less the internet or nightclubs at that time, so we had to communicate in the cold. And you can imagine what happiness it was if suddenly someone found themselves in an apartment for the night without their parents. About 15 people gathered, of course with beer, of course with rock, of course with couples scattered around the corners. Usually, we gathered with a young man I mutually loved, whose parents were lovers of winter fishing. But suddenly it turned out that our mutual friend and constant participant in all gatherings, Dimka, had parents leaving for some kind of Egypt for almost a week. Dimka was a great young man. And Dimka's apartment was appropriate. As many as 4 rooms, count for yourself how many corners there are for couples to wander off. In general, before his parents left, all the company's communication boiled down to who would sleep and where, how much, and what to buy, and what to do if the police arrived. Dimka was not happy about all this. His mother was an overbearing aunt. She would wrap the TV remote control in plastic and bite Dimka's head if he suddenly, in her absence, carried food from the kitchen to the TV. How she found out about this, who knows? Dimka did his best to passively resist the seizure of his apartment, and we were already dreaming of living in a 4-room mansion for a week. When, finally, the parents left, Dimka categorically refused to let anyone in to register. Since the apartment had recently been renovated in European style, all the furniture was replaced. And in general, you never know what we'll do. Mom then eats his whole head off. In general, that day we all got a little angry at Dimka and scattered. I went to visit my boyfriend. Fortunately, we lived a 15-minute walk from each other, so that, as always, I could spend the evening on a budget watching movies on the VCR and timidly kissing. And then go home alone at about 3 a.m. because my beloved's mother believed that after 3 a.m., it was time to spend the night, and decent girls don't spend the night with boys, and she wouldn't let him see me off at night in the winter. You never know. I was young, charming, and naive. I really wanted to marry my beloved, so I didn't contradict him with my mother. I diligently maintained the status of a decent girl and didn't bother myself with the expensive state of affairs. That is, we have what we have. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking from my husband's house towards the house in the night frost, and I had to go just past the house of the major scoundrel Dimka. I met the major scoundrel Dimka at his entrance, sitting on a bench with his legs up. He sat and smoked at the entrance at 4 in the morning. In winter, in a t-shirt and imported training pants, I just couldn't pass by and not wonder what he was doing here. Dimka was incredibly happy to see me, said that he saw me from the balcony, came out to meet me and invite me for a cup of tea. I, of course, was 17 and had no experience in life, but Dimka's entire explanation seemed to me nothing more than an excuse invented on the fly. Well, they don't run out into the street at 4 a.m. in winter in socks to ask girls for tea, especially since the windows of his apartment don't face the entrance. I accepted the offer. We took the elevator to its 8th floor. The door to his apartment was not locked. Not wide open, but simply not locked and slightly open. And Dimka was somehow in no hurry to go there, but babbled something about ladies first and, "You come in, I'll be right there." I really started thinking about robbery. Finally, I saw that Dimka was very frightened by something, and he stayed on the street in socks and a t-shirt, clearly longer than he told me. I didn't go into the apartment, but demanded that, this minute, standing on this staircase, I explain everything, further from Dimka's words. Not literally, of course. Before leaving, my mother cooked a whole pan of borscht for me, so I decided to eat. I heated it up in the pan, ate it, the whole pan, naturally, didn't fit, and you can't put it in the refrigerator hot. I put it on the windowsill in the kitchen to cool down, quickly. I went to the Sega to play in another room. I'm sitting there, playing, and I feel like it's cold, like a window is open somewhere. That is not summer. The windows are all locked. I go to the kitchen, and here I need to explain a little about the layout of the apartment. A corridor led to the kitchen in the shape of an L. The kitchen was at the end of a long stick. At the junction of the sticks there was the entrance door to the apartment, and Dimka walked along the short one. Stick. In general, I turn along the corridor to the kitchen, turn on the light there and see that the window in the kitchen is open. An old woman has climbed into the apartment waist deep and is eating borscht from a pan on the windowsill with her hands. Naturally, I got scared and ran out of the apartment. I didn't even lock the door. I sat at the entrance for about 10 minutes, and then you came up. And, despite the fact that the old woman eating borscht with her hands sticking out in the window is more funny than scary, at that moment I felt not so much scared, but simply creepy. Frightened, trembling, either from the cold or from fear, Dimka, This story, the slightly open door, but there was nowhere to go. I couldn't leave Dimka. He was completely frozen, and we carefully, almost by the hand, entered the apartment. The apartment had lights on in the kitchen and living room. While I was taking off my shoes, Dimka stood next to me, not even looking towards the kitchen. We walked into the kitchen and just fell out. I don't know what Dimka was thinking about at that moment, but I thought, the end, Dimka. The kitchen was borscht. All. Wall, ceiling, kitchen corner. It was as if this borscht had been scattered all over it by the handful. And all this after an ironed, recently made repair. The window was open. There was an empty saucepan in front of her. Of course there was no old woman. I didn't go home then. I was just scared to go alone. She helped Dimka clean the kitchen and asked for details. And we found out one funny thing. Dimka put the pan on the windowsill right in front of the window. And his window is not a small window at the top of a large window, but a long section from the top frame to the bottom. And it opens into the apartment. If someone had opened it, they would certainly have pushed the pan off the windowsill onto the floor. And of course it is simply impossible to open the window from the outside. And if you imagine that it was not locked in winter, then it is impossible to open it without dropping the pan. But Dimka didn't exactly hear the sound of a falling pan. Like this. What it was, I don't know.